You're listening to the Jōrni Podcast. How do the same patterns that shaped us in childhood show up when we search for transformation? And does following a teacher mean giving our power away? Stay tuned for today's episode. This episode contains adult subject matter and some listeners may be triggered by this content. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Jōrni Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. We spend so much energy searching for the person or program or practice that will finally show us who we are. But what happens when the very thing promising transformation becomes the thing that pulls us furthest from ourselves? Marcia Martin is an entrepreneur extraordinaire, renowned global speaker, and master personal and business coach dedicated to helping people create a business and life they love. Often called the Grand Dame of Transformation, she was an original pioneer of the human potential movement and was Senior Vice President at Werner Erhard's EST, helping take the company from inception to a graduate base of millions. She helped Tony Robbins launch his first great book, Unleash Your Power, and take his organization national, trained for LifeSpring, helped market the Hoffman Institute, and was co-creator and CEO of the Transformational Leadership Council. Her students and clients have included Lynn Twist, Robert Kiyosaki, Anthony Robbins, and Jack Canfield. She has trained over 300,000 people worldwide in communication and leadership skills and was knighted for her humanitarian contribution to the world, working on saving the rainforest and ending hunger. Let's meet Marcia Martin. Hi, Marcia. It's so great to have you on the podcast today. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because connecting with your authenticity is such a wonderful space for holistic healing. I feel like authenticity is one of those really underexplored things that really can help people in their own journey to purpose, to joy, to healing. And I'm so glad you're joining me today to chat a little bit about that. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, Petra, I am so happy to be here and honored and delighted. And your work has been so good. And I've heard about it from so many. And the contribution you make is great. So thank you for having me for sure.
Oh, that was such a wonderful intro, and thank you for saying that. And right back at you, because I've been poking around on the internet looking at some of your writings and your interviews, and I feel the same way. And I am so fortunate that you're here today and appreciate so much the work you do. And of course, we'll be talking a little bit about that today as well. So for starters, would you like to share a bit about yourself with our listeners? Maybe the parts of your journey and your story that you feel connect to what you do today or what you want to share about today, and just give our listeners a bit of an idea of who you are.
Wonderful. I have been doing what I do today my entire life since I was in my teens, which is I work with people to have them know who they are more fully and thoroughly and profoundly so that they can have the things that they want in their life. And I always say my life's work is having your life work better. I'm a transformational coach and an executive trainer. I give speaking engagements, and I've been in this work my whole life. So my story begins, and it's a very unique kind of story, actually. I think we're all snowflakes and individual and have our own gifts. But my history is amazing. When I was just a teenager and into my early 20s, I interned with my aunt, who was a clairvoyant healer. And so this is when I first got into my work. And she taught me all about the metaphysics of the world and energetics and how the mind works and about meditation and about the chakras and about who I was as a higher being and how I could serve. And so I was so young that I just expected my whole life that's what everybody had learned. And I now learn many years later that usually people learn it at their end of their lives, not at the beginning. So I did life backwards. And as a result, I think I was catapulted into a journey that was destined to be and guided towards that light of opening up light for others. And in the early 70s, I was one of the key architects of the human potential movement, which was the precursor of the self-help industry, which is now a $48 billion industry. So I was there at the beginning. And I met a man by the name of Werner Erhard in February of 71. And I took a training, his very first training he had ever done in human potential. And it was in San Francisco, and it was at the beginning of the human potential movement. And the Buddhists were in the streets chanting and had robes, and we were all meditating, and some of us were smoking a little marijuana and exploring who we were, and we were protesting against the Vietnam War, and it was a very colorful and electric time for the baby boomers. We called ourselves flower children and hippies, and we wanted peace and love, and we wanted the world to come together. And when I took this training, I realized in the training, it was called Mind Dynamics. It was the very first training that this man, Werner Erhard, had ever led. And I realized this training was really about all the things my aunt had taught me. And that if I were working with Werner and helping him get this training out in the world, I would help people to know the things I had learned. And that became my mission. And so I started working with Werner. And then together, a few of us, just a handful of people, we created, Werner founded it, of course, and we helped him create the training called Erhard Seminars Training, which is called EST, which is now well known as Landmark Forum, which has over 3.5 million graduates. And in the beginning, in that first training I took with Werner, there were 31 of us. So when I became the vice president and helped build EST, and for the next almost 10 years or a decade of my life, I worked in building EST and taking it around the world. By the time I left, there were almost 800,000 graduates. So it was an amazing ride. And as you can imagine, I became quite famous and well known. And I was at the peak of the human potential movement. So it was almost like being part of creating a cultural revolution, which was an interesting experience in itself. And so I've even written a book about it called Sex, Power, and Transformation, which is my memoir, which tells both the light and the dark. And I hope that we can get into that in the podcast because so many people do want good mental health. And authenticity is such an important part of that. But there are so many programs now and so many things you can do and so many therapists and so many charismatic gurus and so many books and so many courses that you need to know the warning signs also of when you're giving your power away or when you're becoming unauthentic, because it can take you down a path that's not good. So I have both the great stories and miracles and magic to share, and also the warnings of some of the damage that can be done or the destruction or the things that aren't working. So that was the beginning of me being in the world as a teacher, a trainer, a speaker. And since then, I've gone into corporations like Chase and Warner Brothers and Hard Rock and Intercontinental Hotels and trained senior executives all over the world in leadership and championship performance. So that's a little tidbit of me and my life and my story.
Wow, I love it. And thank you for sharing. You truly have such a unique story to share. And I wish everyone had that insight, maybe from a loving grandmother or an aunt or a cousin, as you had that upbringing and that connection that brings us back to a lot of those things in the world that, as you said, you thought that everybody had been brought up like that. I feel those things are very useful when we're trying to find our own path, knowing who we are and how we fit in the world and what our purpose is, even if that evolves as we grow and we evolve. But I think that's a fantastic sort of foundation to start your life with. Many of us search for that all of our lives, and some of us never find it. So that sounds magical.
That is so true. And Petra, I am so blessed because when I look back now, and as you said, I thought it was just normal. I was 19 or 20 when I interned with my aunt. And so just a young girl, really, and I had come from a very broken family. And my father was an alcoholic and he abused my mother and emotionally abused us kids, even though we loved him to death. Still, he was scary and childhood was scary. And so I developed my own patterns about how I saw myself as a woman and how I operated with men. And all of those come into the story later also. So it wasn't too abnormal for me to notice Werner Erhard because he was a charismatic, powerful man. And I wanted to please him just like I wanted to please my father. And so some of those patterns unraveled as well, and I began to know myself better. But I remember one of the things that my aunt taught me from the very beginning that I just accepted, I'm sure because I was so young, and I now realize how complicated and profound it was the way that she taught me. She said, Marcia, God is always the same. God never changes. But people have different ways of viewing God. And so, if you want to be an effective human being and be able to relate successfully with other people, you need to know what their interpretation is and what their traditions are and what their beliefs are and how they hold God, because it's the same God, just a different way of holding God. And so she had me actually study all the world religions so that I understood. And it was a simple thing in the beginning. When she said it made sense to me. But I can see now that it's not that simple to really hold that kind of understanding for everybody. We get stuck in our own beliefs and then make other people wrong for their beliefs, and then wars happen. But it was an interesting time to have that as a foundation. And the other thing she told me was I was a light worker. Now, that didn't make any sense to me. I'm like 19, 20 years old. I go, okay. And then she said, and my purpose in life was to teach people how to love. And that didn't make any sense either, but I was just a young girl of 19 or 20. And I said, okay. So that has been my work my whole life. And I see that awakening the light in others and having them find their personal power and their own authenticity so that they can see the world in such a way that they can contribute in the most worthwhile way has been really my life's work. So it all started there for sure.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I can tell by how you speak about this, how passionate you are about this. And I can really feel your energy and your light on this side of the Zoom room. I can only imagine if you are in a room with people physically also and you are training them or teaching them, especially in these leadership positions, the kind of, I want to say, emotions and energy that come across that really let people discover what's inside, what they can reconnect with. And I find that's one of the pieces that many of us are still searching for and are still missing in today's world. And even though, let's say we look back, as you wrote your memoir, so we're looking back maybe at the 70s, so about good 50 years ago, but I feel like many of the things that you're speaking about haven't really changed in today's world. There's still many of us women living in a male-guided world. There are still many women struggling with their own power. I feel like a lot of the things that you're touching on are still the same today. How do you feel about, has that really changed in such a really obvious way? Or do you feel that there are a lot of things that still run these same patterns as they were 50 years ago?
I don't think the patterns have changed. I think that the change is happening on an individual basis. And my story is interesting because after I left Est, which was now Landmark and is the largest personal development company in the world with its 3.5 million graduates, then I went and found that all of the other great trainers and teachers wanted me to come and work with them because they knew what I had done with Werner and at Est. And so I ran Tony Robbins' business in the very beginning for him for 2 years in the early 80s and helped take him national and helped him launch his first book, Unlimited Power. So I saw the whole world of Tony Robbins and that side of it and how he presented and how he inspired people. And then I worked with John Hanley, who is the founder of LifeSpring, which was a large experiential, very large company, experiential training all over the United States. And I helped him reignite his Los Angeles office and helped him train his trainers. And then I worked with Bob Hoffman, who is the founder of the Quindrinity process, the Hoffman process, and helped him market that and take it international. I was instrumental in opening up the Canadian part of the Hoffman process. And so I've worked with so many of the great trainers and teachers. I was the co-creator with Jack Canfield of the Transformational Leadership Council and brought all the great authors and teachers together in an association. And eventually, with Jack, created the Association of Transformational Leaders, ATL. I have seen so many great teachers, and I've been involved with so many powerful men. And as a woman, from being a girl growing into womanhood is a process in itself, but being in a man's world. And I've always looked at it as if I was a powerful woman who didn't really understand her power in the beginning, as we are girls. We sometimes aren't told about our power. We're looked down upon or less than, or go play with your doll while the boys run the world. But I was a powerful woman dealing with men with power, not even necessarily powerful men, but men with power, and in a world that was a man's world. And so I feel I do have a lot to share about that. And I think what's changing is women are finding their voice. And I'm so happy for that because that has been my work, to help people find their voice, to help people find their personal power. And when you find your voice, what you discover is the answers of the wisdom of who you are and how it all works and what's best for you are within. And sometimes we get lost because we think the answer is somewhere outside of us in somebody else's answer. So I consider all the personal development courses good resources, but not answers, because we have our own answer that's best for us. But we need sometimes resources, people that inspire us, people that teach us, people that mentor us, coaches that guide us, programs that train us and teach us, courses that show us the way, books that are enlightening. Those are great resources for us to consider so that we can take that knowledge within and then make it work for ourselves. And I find the danger is that many times people forget that they have an answer, and they look outside themselves to charismatic gurus and great leaders and powerful people and people who have big organizations or lots of money or lots of fame. And they think that because they have all of that, they must know the answer. And I've found another part of it, which is I find the teachers themselves, the leaders, the heads of the corporations or the charismatic gurus, or some of them get tainted by the addiction of power. And when they have so many people idolizing them and adoring them and looking to them for the answer, they get swept away in that, and they forget that they don't have the answer for the others. They have an answer and some wisdom that they've experienced that works for them, that they can contribute so another person can look to see if it works for that person. And they have the strength to hold those people while they go through the fear of the looking. But when it gets to the point where they say, this is the way, and the person isn't strong enough to really withstand the power of so much agreement around them, they're afraid to say, I don't agree, or I don't think that is right, or that's not right for me. And to have that courage, first to understand who you are, and then to have the courage to stand up for who you are, which I think is beginning to happen in our world. You can see it. There are a lot of young women standing up right now and saying, this isn't right, or this is good, or this is, and that's part of my work. So I think that there is great change, but the change isn't in the dimension of the outside world. The change is that in each of the individuals, we're getting more people waking up and being willing to have the courage to share their own voice and truth.
That's so profound. And Yeah, it makes me think of a lot of the things we have seen coming, especially out of, I want to say, the 60s and 70s and forward, where there were also a lot of like the yoga gurus and things like that that ended fairly badly in some of the instances. So I hear what you're saying about giving your power away to someone else who says to you they have the answers for you, and that can be precarious all on its own. So thinking today that if you're saying more women are standing up, more women are finding that power, what kind of guidance would you give our listeners if they are at that point where they're maybe feeling that they're disagreeing what's out there or with what they've heard, or maybe with their own guru or whoever they're listening to at the time? How can we really connect with our inner power? How can we find that alignment and authenticity in ourselves so that we come into that place where we're okay saying, hey, I disagree with that, but this works for me or this works for me? Where do you stand on that?
Well, this is a big question. And this is a discussion that I love for sure. First of all, one of the things that I teach, and I do it in corporations, and it's interesting because when I do it in corporations, they think I'm coming in about leadership and performance, right? And communication skills, which I do. It's all a part. You have to learn leadership and communication and skills of being able to communicate well. But it really is very spiritual in that what I end up teaching in the 3-day course I give to executives is the concepts, the understanding, the different pieces, like the ABCs that they need to know about being an effective human being. And those kinds of ABCs, if you think about how you learn to read, and you go into a bookstore now and you get a book and you pull out a book by Hemingway and you start reading as if that's nothing, as if it's, of course, everybody can do this. And you forget how it all started, because it started by just you understanding the fundamentals, the ABCs, and literally the ABCs, right? The sound of a letter. And then you discovered it could make a word and then a sentence and a paragraph. And pretty soon you're reading Hemingway. So the only reason you can read Hemingway is because of that foundation of the basics of the ABCs. And there are basics of things you need to know in order to answer the question you just asked about how do I get to the place where I can be an authentic human being? How do I access that piece of power within myself? And we haven't been taught them. So I've created a course, and I'm actually creating a course right now that I can do digitally and have people online, and I'm going to do it either weekly or bi-weekly or something with this same course, because I think it's really important for people to know. And so I'll give you an example of a basic. You need to know how you learn. So, for example, you have a mind and you have a body, and they're not the same, but they're connected. And your mind learns in a particular way, and your body learns in a different way. So your mind learns through understanding. And that's where most of the education comes from, because people don't know that your body has to learn too. So you sit in a classroom and you listen and you're told, or you read a book, or you get a lecture and you understand it. But then how do you apply it? Well, you have to apply it by having a body that is applying it. And your body learns in a different way. Your body learns through practice. So take, for example, the first time you learned to ride a bicycle. It didn't matter how long your dad or your mom told you how to ride a bicycle. They explained it to you, and you read a book about it maybe. And it didn't matter, because when you got on the bicycle, all that understanding didn't help. Your body had to learn to ride the bicycle, and your body only learns through practice by doing it. And when you practice something, you start as a beginner. And most people are unwilling to be a beginner because we're naturally thrown to wanting to be right, look good, and know the answer. Experts are right, they look good, and they know the answer, but beginners are clumsy, they're wrong, and they don't know anything. So we resist being a beginner, which cuts us off from our capacity to learn any skill, because for the body to learn, it has to be willing to start as a beginner. So that's a concept that you should know, because there is a skill you must know if you're going to get in touch with your personal power. And one of the skills is you need to learn to meditate. You need to learn to be still. and to quiet your mind. Because think about how the mind works. It's like an ocean. When the ocean is raging and in a storm, and the waves are 30 and 40 and 50 feet high and crashing into each other from all different points, you could throw the Empire State Building into that mishmash and you wouldn't be able to see what the ripple was. You wouldn't be able to see the effect. It would get lost in all of that rage and storming. But the ocean, if you've ever been on a moonlit night, maybe in Hawaii, sitting on a boat, which I have been, and the ocean is so still, it's like glass. You could take a small pea and throw it into the water, and you could see every single effect that it made. And your mind is like that. How we create, we have to hold a thought and an intention, just like that pea. And it has to build in momentum. It has to have ripples, and the ripples need to get bigger. And so you have to grow the thought. But if you're throwing the thought that you have that you want to create into your mind, and your mind is raging and noisy and full of all sorts of fears and doubts and everything else, then you're not going to get any momentum or movement. So you have to learn how to still your mind. But if you've never learned that, you're starting as a beginner. And when you're a beginner and you sit down and you close your eyes and you say, okay, I want to be still for 5 minutes, and you're starting to itch and you're starting to be thirsty and you have to pee and all of these other thoughts come into your mind. And then you're worried about what time is dinner and is somebody going to ring the doorbell and am I pregnant or whatever is going on in your head. You cannot be still. But that's okay, because that's the beginning of training your body, how to still your mind. And so when you understand certain concepts, then you're willing to take the time and spend the effort to do the work to discover and learn the skills that are necessary for you to access that part of you that is your personal power, that will allow you to be in touch with your authenticity, where you can speak from. And when you get there, there are many other things that I could teach you and that you would need to learn. Then you have some power to come from your own self. And when you add some courage to that, then we get some momentum in that. And then we have voices that are shouting and saying what's so for them. So it's a long process. It's a journey, but isn't everything a journey? And that's part of it too, is enjoying the journey.
Yeah. Absolutely. I feel it works the same for our healing, our personal development. We're on, I feel, a lifelong journey to keep evolving, to keep discovering, to keep learning. So I think coming from that beginner mindset can be helpful in what you're describing, so that we're okay just letting go and seeing what happens instead of worrying about, am I doing this right? And how will people look at me? What will people think of me? But really take that kind of childlike wonder, approach some of these pieces with, oh, I'm just going to see what happens and what that does for me. Yeah, so true. Wow. I feel like we could talk about this for so much longer time. but I'll ask you one more thing, because I feel that you touched on some of that when you spoke about your memoir, your book, that you have both experienced the really highs of the personal development, self-development, and also the lows of it. What should our listeners be aware of? I feel that self-development does have its dark sides depending on where you look, but so does everything if you look out in the world. But what are some of the things that our listeners could be aware of when it comes to their own journeys? Maybe some of them are looking for coaches or for mentors. Maybe some of them are coaches and mentors who are working with clients, and some of them are leaders and are leading big organizations. And what's important for them to know to be coming into a place where they are leading and living from an aligned space that is maybe love-centered or heart-centered, and however they want to look at that? What should they be aware of?
Well, one of the things is a skill set that we all need, whether you're a coach or a teacher or a person that needs a coach or wants a coach. And that is the ability to tolerate and be willing to allow and experience another point of view. And most of us just can't do that because we haven't been taught. And what I mean by being taught is we haven't practiced it. It all goes back to how the body learns. And it's just like when you said some people take things personally. If I find somebody that takes things personally, what I do is I sit them down and I start telling them things that are going to jar them. I say, okay, like the only way you're going to learn this is if we get yourself through it. You have to experience it, and then you have to be aware of what happens when somebody says, I'm not doing a good job. Oh, I feel awful. I feel terrible. I don't want, and we blame somebody else. And then the other person doesn't want to tell you what they really see because they don't want to hurt your feelings. But that's all backwards. First of all, they're not hurting your feelings, they're just sharing an opinion. And it's an opinion that you may agree with or not. And if you can't tolerate another person's opinion, we're in trouble. If you can't just be there and consider it possible and consider the person is smart enough to share that point of view. So it's a certain kind of listening that you have to develop within yourself when you're listening to other people. And I say you need a generous listening. And most people have a defensive listening. So usually listening is I'm hearing what you're saying. While you're saying it, what I'm doing is putting together what my answer is going to be to debate you and tell you why what you're saying is not right. That's not listening or considering the other person is any kind of smart person or has something that is possible to say. So I teach people to listen from the point of view, pretend the person is brilliant and whatever they're saying is possible. Now, just think about it. If you were with someone you thought was really brilliant, think about how you would listen. And if you were with somebody that you thought was really stupid, think about how you would listen. It's a totally different listening, right? So if you can be with everyone as if they're brilliant, you will listen in a different way. And eventually you will be able to allow them to share in such a way that they give up the thing that they're holding on to or sharing. And it's if you have two glasses of water and they're both filled up with water and you want to put the water from one of the glasses into the other, but it's full, everybody knows if I want to put some water into that glass, I have to empty out the glass first that I'm going to fill up, and then I can put something in. What you're saying is you have to create space for something to exist. And the same is true with communication. Communication runs under that law. For anything to exist, there must be space for it to exist in. So feelings and words and language and emotions and ideas all take up space. So if somebody's sharing something with me, to me, that I don't like, and I'm pushing it back, essentially I'm filling back up their space. So now they're not going to have any space to hear my idea. So in order to create some space over there with them, I have to first listen in such a way that I get it, that it actually is given to me. But they won't give it to me if I resist it. If I keep saying, oh, that's wrong. Oh, you don't understand. Oh, no, that's not correct. And I keep forcing it back, I'm not emptying them out. So I need to be able to listen in such a way that they have some space to listen to what I'm saying. But we're not taught that either. And so there's so much. That's why it takes 3 days to give all of the ABCs, because there's so many. But once you understand the fundamentals of how your mind works, how your body works, how the universe works, how communication works, how language works, how manifestation works, then you can start playing with it and begin from being a beginner to getting to be an expert. Not everybody's going to be an expert after 3 days, but at least they'll be at the place where they understand enough that they're willing to practice some of the things that they need to learn. It's a journey for sure, but I think one of the things that people can do that will provide more momentum for them than anything else is to just do this. Welcome the experience. Consider it's a gift. Just look at life as if universe knows best. And universe is throwing to you the things that you need to experience in order to have the things that you said that you wanted. Universe listens, and you say, I want this, I want that, I think this, I would like that to happen. And the universe listens. And then the universe says, oh, in order for you to have that, you're going to have to experience this and learn this. And so here you are. Here's the experience you need in order to learn that so that you can have the thing that you said. But the minute we get an experience, then we judge it. We say, I don't want to experience that. Well, I don't want to do that. And so we stop the process and screw it up. If we would just flow with it, welcome the experience. And I think that's one of the things that I learned when I was young too, is I learned life backwards. Instead of having a breakdown first and then learning how to handle it, I learned how to handle it before I had the breakdowns. But what happened is it wasn't then that I didn't have the breakdowns later in life. I had a divorce and was totally horrifically heartbroken. And I lost a stepson to suicide and was broken. I've lost all my money when I put together an organization and took a risk and went out there, and that wasn't fun. I've had the other side too. I've been very successful and made lots of money and impacted millions of lives and been on a stage in front of 20,000 people adoring me. And so I've had all of those experiences of joy also. But what I've learned along the way is it's not the experience itself, it's your response to the experience that allows you to have the outcome. And your response has to be a choice instead of a reaction. And the only way it can be a choice is if you're present and you're willing to be here with what's happening. And if you're resisting what's happening, you're not here. And so if you could just welcome the experience and consider it's going to be beneficial somehow. I love that movie where it said, if it's all going to be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. And just keep saying that to yourself until you get to the end when it's okay. Then you're in the flow, and then you can get the lessons that you need to have and experience them to grow as a human being, to be able to have the skill sets that you need to have to be able to create the things that you want to create. And that's a journey. And people love roller coasters when they're 2 and 3 and 4 and 10 and 15. And somehow by the time we get to 30, we say, I don't want to be on a roller coaster anymore. But life is a roller coaster, so get used to it.
Yeah, I think that's some of the best advice we've had on the podcast so far. So
oh my gosh,
deceptively simple and yet so profound. And you're right. I used to love roller coasters. And now when these things happen, I'm always like, why? Why can't it just be good? But you're right. If we just stop resisting and we take this as part of this journey with that, and we need to be shaped and evolved and molded as well to be ready for certain experiences, as you said. And it's easy to forget that. It's easy to forget that we're not born with all of that ready at our fingertips. But if we want certain things, if we want to impact millions of lives, there's a journey to come into that person that can really handle all of that and have a container for that. So yeah, superb. And I think for our listeners, there's so many little nuggets in there that you may have to play the podcast back and listen to that again, because I feel there's a lot of things that our listeners can take away from that. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm just sitting here taking notes and I'm like, yeah, I have to re-listen to this episode because there was so much in there that absolutely, I think for every listener out there, there's some piece that they can apply to their lives and where they can probably see that could fit in their lives. So absolutely amazing. And Marcia, what do you hope that listeners are going to take away from your memoir, from your book, in relation to everything that we've spoken about, your personal power, your authenticity, the ups and downs of life? What do you hope that they take away once they dive into your book and read that?
I think, first of all, when you dive into my book is magical. I didn't know it would be magical. It just happened that it is. And I didn't use AI and I didn't have a ghostwriter. I wrote from my heart. I had a good editor who kept asking me, how did that make you feel? And what did you learn from that? And one of the things is that the human spirit is so profoundly strong. The human spirit is bigger. Who you are as a being is so much bigger and more powerful than you ever dreamed yourself could be. And you will get through. And you will have experiences. All of us do. I was betrayed. I was heartbroken. I was happy. I was joyous. I thought life was at its pinnacle, and then it fell apart, and then it came back again. And that's the thing I hope that people take away from my book, is that who they are is enough. If they're just willing to somehow approach life as if it's a gift, and as if it's okay. And as if somehow there's a part of them, a higher self, a divine being that knows best. And the universe gives you signals. And sometimes if you don't listen, the universe will take you down. And so you better listen. It's a better thing after you learn the signals to not say, but no, I want that anyway. And then the universe says, okay, but we tried to tell you earlier that this is not the path you should be on. And not to be unactive. You have to have your own choices, and you have to make your own choices and understand that choices have consequences, and then to be responsible for the consequences, but to continue to be aware of what works and what doesn't work, not what's right or wrong. That's a filter from a judgment, from some belief system that you were given when you were young. And somebody else's righteousness will be different than yours. So if you could look to see, is what I'm thinking, being, experiencing, doing, in action working to produce the things I want? Or is it not working? And if it's not working, perhaps get back to being centered instead of upset or angry or blaming. Centered is when you're being open, connected, present. And that's where you can choose. And choose what will work for the most amount of people, for the most amount of good, to move the ball forward on your life path with the mission that you're choosing. And that simple guide will give you, that's a good enough map for you to learn everything else yourself, essentially.
Wonderful. And where can our listeners find your book? Is it for sale? Has it been published? Where can they find it?
Yeah, go to Amazon. It came out twice. The first time I have two subtitles, so when it came out and then it came out again, but it just has been released in the last month, and it's a #1 Amazon bestseller. It's called Sex, Power, and Transformation by Marcia Martin. And you can also go to my website, Marcia Martin, and Marcia is Marcia, marciamartin.com. And on my website, you'll find ways that you can do coaching with me. You can do corporate trainings with me. You can become a member of my membership club and view my digital library and get some free gifts. And you can find the link to see the book. So it's all there if you go to marciamartin.com. But go to Amazon and buy it. Read it. Have fun with it. It's a joyride. Sex, Power, and Transformation.
Amazing. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Marcia's offerings in the show notes as well. So you'll find the links that she just described in there. And we were talking a little bit before the recording that I have a PDF copy of the book, but I really want to have a printed one. So that's what I'm going to go out and do, is get the printed copy. For me, it's a completely different experience, whether I'm reading something in a PDF or on an e-reader, or whether I'm holding an actual printed book in my hands. And maybe that all has to do, like you said, with how we learn or how we take things in. For me, it's that smell of the pages and the feeling of having that book in my hand that it makes it all really magical and different. So readers and listeners, however that works for you, go out and get your copy, whether that's on the Kindle or you want to print a copy like I do. Find the way that works best for you and dive into this magical book that Marcia has written. And then we should all reconvene and talk about that, because I feel that there's going to be so much to talk about after I read the book. So
I would love that.
Yeah, that sounds like a really great thing. We'll reconvene after I've read the book, and then there'll be more things to go over and to share with our listeners. And for today, Marcia, I want to thank you for spending this time with me, for sharing your wisdom with our listeners and sharing about your book and your own journey and your story. It has been such a pleasure and an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you for this time.
Thank you, Petra. And thank you for what you do for the world and the light that you are and the contribution that you make. You're very beautiful. And I just am so appreciative and honored to be here with you.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that. And for every single one of us who does this kind of work, as you said, light worker, support, and we are shining our work into the world. I feel it's so needed, especially at probably this time in our lives. So thank you to you, Marcia. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. And we will see you again in the next episode. Take care, everyone, and be well. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Jōrni Podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Jōrni on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejorni.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.